prior to praying, there's a general principle, a maxim, that if water comes, tayammum's invalid. Right? إِذَا جَاءَ الْمَاء بَطَلَتْ tayammum. Okay. However, when one is not praying, one doesn't have to see it. If you see it, you're certain of water. The mere possibility of water, you believing that it's possible that there's water, breaks tayammum. It's called tawahhumul ma. So like if we were to say 100% is certainty, from 99 to 51% is a strong supposition. 50% is what we call doubt. And then below 50%, we call it just deeming it possible or a possibility or likelihood. Any of that level of possibility, from 2% possibility up to 100% possibility, if you think there's water and you're not praying, your tayammum's broken. The example the fuqaha use is seeing a mirage. Like you haven't prayed yet and you see a mirage and you say, oh, there's a lake. And then you realize it's not a lake, it's actually just a mirage. That breaks your tayammum. Or if you're at a camp and a new caravan comes and you think, yeah, they probably have water I can get. That breaks your tayammum while you're not praying. Okay? So just believing it possible that there's water now when you're not praying breaks tayammum. So seeing is mentioned there, but it's more than that. Okay, now what about when you are praying? What about when you're praying and then water comes? Then there's details. Okay? If you're in a prayer that doesn't have to be made up when you prayed with tayammum, knowing that water is there does not invalidate the prayer and does not invalidate the tayammum. Okay? If you're in a prayer that has to be made up when you pray it with tayammum, then when you know that water has come, you're 100% sure of water, your prayer is invalidated. Okay? Is that clear? Okay, when you're praying, knowing that there is water, there's two possibilities. So we're not talking about 1% or a 99%, we're talking about 100%. Somebody comes up with a bucket of water and sets it next to you and starts making wudu while you're praying. You know there's water there and you're in the prayer. Then there's two possibilities. If it's a prayer that has to be repeated when you made it with tayammum, then that prayer is invalid because you're going to have to repeat that prayer anyway. If it's a prayer that doesn't have to be repeated, even though you prayed with tayammum, then that prayer is still valid. However, in that second case, it's better if there's time to break the prayer and make wudu and then make it over. Okay, so go ahead.
What would be an example of
Jazakallah khairan. That's because you have the mind of someone who understands fiqh. So the fuqaha call this jawab su'al muqaddar. The answer to a question which will naturally occur in this case is, well then what are the prayers that have to be made up when you prayed them with tayammum? There's a few examples. Some of them are when you do tayammum because of a covering on part of your body, and we're going to mention those in the next class. And another example is when you do tayammum in a place where there is typically water. Right? If you do tayammum in a place where there is typically water, then you have to repeat the prayer even if at that time there's no water there. So like, la samahallah, there's no water in Oakland that you can find. And you do tayammum here. Those prayers have to be made up because that's not a place that typically doesn't have water. So it's an unusual case. Right? There you go. No. And then there's some other examples, but those are two. One other example is tayammum just because of cold. It's too cold to use water. That's an unusual excuse, so you have to make up those prayers. Yeah. So the prayers that have to be made up when you pray with tayammum, if water comes, you're going to have to make another prayer anyway. That prayer is invalidated. If it comes and you're in a prayer that doesn't have to be made up, it's better to break the prayer. So when water comes, typically you're going to, rather than, if it's before the prayer, khalas. You have to make wudu. إِذَا جَاءَ الْمَاء بَطَلَتْ tayammum. Tayammum's invalidated when water comes. That's before the prayer. If you're in the prayer, it's typically you're going to break the prayer and use water and make it up, unless you're in a place where you don't have to repeat the prayer and the time's going to go out. That's it in a nutshell. So when water comes, basically the principle is no more tayammum. La ilaha illallah. And then the last is apostasy. Apostasy breaks tayammum, and he said, may Allah protect us. What is apostasy? What is apostasy? The belief of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah is that major sins are not apostasy. Right? Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah does not excommunicate people for major sins. Right? Who did that? The Khawarij. That's Kharijites. The Kharijites would believe that someone who did a major sin had apostated. That's not a mainstream Sunni belief, though. The Kharijite also fought the companions. Some people nowadays race to make accusations of apostasy. Their behavior is Khawarij-like. The scholars say it's attributed to, you hear it attributed to Imam Abu Hanifa, and you also hear it attributed to al-Baqallani. He said, for me to bring